Chapter 7 is about how we learn. Learning is what allows us to respond to changes. So changes in our environment, changes in our knowledge, in our awareness. Learning is us responding to it, us changing as a result of new information. One concept we want to keep in mind is called conditioning, which is just the ability to connect a stimuli with a response. In school, a lot of us were conditioned to connect the ringing of the school bell with either the start of class, the dismissal of a class, time for lunch, time for recess. But we're conditioned to a stimuli. We learn that when this happens, this should be the response we give. Okay, that's conditioning. Now, Ivan Pavlov is the one who came up with classical conditioning. And that's simply the concept of taking a stimulus that wouldn't really matter to us or elicit a response from us and pairing it with a stimulus that we're going to respond to naturally, like food. I smell good food, I get hungry, right? That I don't have to learn. Nobody has to teach me that. Smell good food, get hungry, have an appetite. But what he learned when he was studying his dogs was that the dogs eventually started responding to the people who were feeding them, whether or not they had food with them. So just the sight of the white lab coat or the sound of the door opening caused the dogs to begin to respond as if they're hungry or expecting food, even though it may not be feeding time. So it was an accident that he realized it, but basically he's saying that we can be trained to respond to different stimuli in a desired manner. Okay? Now, the idea of extinction is that we can also unlearn this training. And then the idea of spontaneous recovery is that we can relearn it much quicker than it took us to learn it the first time. Now, the idea of generalization is that sometimes we can get the stimuli confused. So, say the stimulus that I've been conditioned to respond to is a ringing bell. Okay, I hear a phone ring and it sounds similar, and I give that the conditioned response. I got the stimulus mixed up. I confused it with something similar. That's the idea behind generalization. If Pavlov took his dogs for a walk, white coats on the lab assistants are what usually stimulates them to salivate, to start to get hungry. And they see somebody walk by wearing a white winter jacket, and they salivate and get hungry. They saw a white coat, but it wasn't the right kind of white coat. They generalized the stimulus. Okay? Now, this theory is very helpful when it comes to looking at phobias and how we treat phobias. Now, we know that a phobia is a strong and irrational fear. Almost has an unsolicited or uncontrolled response. Absolute panic. Okay? Not just, I don't like it, or I'm afraid of this and I'm going to move out of the way, but just a fear that overwhelms, debilitates your ability to control your body. One way that we can use to help people overcome these phobias is to desensitize them. It's to train them to respond differently. And we can use classical conditioning to do that. We can also use operant conditioning. Now, the idea behind operant conditioning is that I'm going to teach you to do the things I want you to do and train you not to do the things that I don't want you to do, and I'm going to use reinforcement and punishment to accomplish this. So, with operant conditioning, I'm teaching you a new behavior, and I'm going to reinforce you when you do that behavior so that you continue to do it. But when you act in an opposing manner to that behavior, I'm going to punish you so that you don't oppose it again. That's the idea behind operant conditioning. It's learning based on consequences. Okay, and the law behind that is what we call the law of effect. It's really kind of common sense. It just says that if a positive outcome results from the behavior, then you're going to do it again. And if a negative outcome results from the behavior, then you're not going to do it again. Okay, pretty common sense. But it's the basis. It's called the law of effect, and it's the basis for operant conditioning. So we have the reinforcement that increases the likelihood of behavior, and we have the punishment that decreases the likelihood of that behavior. Now, these two types of conditioning are not the only ways we have to learn. So a couple others you want to keep in mind are insight. And just like you think of when you hear the word, insight is that sudden flashbulb, that aha moment where you just seem to know the answer. It came to you. That's insight. It is a true form of learning. And then there's modeling. Leading people by example. Children are going to do what they see, not what you tell them to do, whether you like it or not. So modeling the good behavior, doing it first, leading by example. I'm sure we've all heard the term, do what I say, not what I do. It just doesn't work. And it doesn't work with adults either. And then one more term that I want you to be aware of in this textbook is called social dilemma. And it's really just a decision where something that is beneficial for you as the individual is going to be harmful to the group that you're associated with. So whether that be a group of work people, or if that be the family, or a social group, a volunteer group that you're with, you have a particular decision to make, and if you make the decision that benefits you, it's going to be harmful to the group. That's the idea behind social dilemma. And we learn from those experiences. We base those decisions on what we've already learned, the consequences. So that's part of that operant conditioning. We learn by consequences.